You just witnessed this. I just got a phone call from a local guy down in the barrios of San Patricio County.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's a guy, older guy, had a stroke several years ago. He's actually legally blind, no formal education. Guy I worked with when I was doing the gangbanger stories a couple of years ago when I was doing local paperwork. When I moved a couple of weeks ago, I had a bunch of extra stuff in my garage, old furniture, odds and ends. He came over because he likes to deal in trash and secondhand stuff. He came over and took a truckload out. He called me about 10 days ago and he said, "Hey, Mark, tell me about this book in here, Scientology Handbook." He read the introductory part of it, all about the religions and all that stuff, and he got to the end of it. He said, "It's kind of interesting, but do I gotta like get rid of Catholicism, you know, if I do this?" I said, no, that's just the PR part. Get into the meat and potatoes of it. Didn't think anything of it. He calls me back a few days later and says, you know, there's some really good stuff in that book. He said, I was reading, and he said, I went and got myself a dictionary, which I never used before, which he says that alone is incredible, able to understand this stuff. But he says, you know, my old lady, she's so wrapped up in this gang business for the past 5 years, she can't think of anything else, and she doesn't ever do anything about it. So I learned from this book that if she raises her affinity, reality, and communication with the problem, she has a greater understanding and therefore can do something about it. And I explained it to her, and she started doing it for the first time ever. And I started thinking about this in relationship to what you were talking about on the have, reversed be, do, have, the have, do, be basis upon which Scientology is being operated on.
Right. Well, that was really what you said.
Right, but it was in response to the story you told about the idol orgs, etc.
Right.
Okay, you got to have a cathedral in order to impart wisdom. Which, incidentally, if you want to go back to fundamentals, my philosophy by L. Ron Hubbard,
exactly.
It's they're building ivory towers and nobody's allowed in. Okay, books are the first line of dissemination. Always was when RH was around. If you get a book in the guy's hand, you're imparting knowledge. And I started thinking about it. I mean, this guy, this old friend of mine, I never even conceived of disseminating to him or anything like that. I mean, he got a book in his hands, and he, right now, is more of a Scientologist than David Miscavige will ever be. By definition, by L. Ron Hubbard's definition. A Scientologist is somebody who uses Scientology technology to better conditions in life, and here's the guys doing it and reporting into me on it.
Right.
Okay. So, my thought is this. Ever since L. Ron Hubbard died, the emphasis has been to actually destroy what he was doing during the last few years of his life, which was get books and knowledge into the hands of people. I mean, essentially, that was the thrust that created the boom of the 80s. And, of course, the 70s and the 60s.
And the 50s.
And the 50s, right? I mean, you and I were there.
Right.
It's all off of that. Wipe out Ronnie Miscavige, wipe out Bill Demdu, wipe out Jeff Hawkins, wipe out Steve Hall, wipe out every one of these marketing geniuses.
Right.
Whose they understood that. You get the knowledge out there. And I realized something. Do you know, in my opinion, I think that the greatest step for dissemination of Scientology, the most important probably dissemination move for Scientology, is to bust the monopoly on the copyrights.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more, Marty. I don't even think it's just the dissemination. I also think it's the purity of the technology. I know that that sounds contradictory to what everybody thinks, but just I don't mean to interrupt, but just one thought. If instead of going to a Miscavige palace and getting regged for IAS donations, for this donation, for that donation, SEC checked, etc., etc., you could go next door to someone else's Scientology delivery center, and you've got to choose which one do you want to go to based on the excellence of the delivery, how the people treated you, whether you felt like you were being ripped off or whether you felt like you were just a mark that walked in the door. It would be the end of what's become the vulture culture of Scientology.
Absolutely. Now I agree with you. In terms of the copyrights, think about this. if we were 30 years down the road or 26 years down the road or wherever the thing is, 50 years after the author's death, and Penguin Books was free to pick any book they want to pick that they think is going to, I mean, they would be publishers all over the place reprinting these books and doing it on their own dime.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, you literally, those cathedrals, those idol orcs are literally messed barriers to getting your hands on a book. I mean, that's what I'm
I agree with you.
You know?
I agree 100%. I mean, I think that also a part of the answer to this issue with books is in today's world, the internet provides the solution to the dissemination of the technology. Someone said recently, I think it may have been Dan or Jeff, you know, there is that reference where LRH talks about the ideal dissemination program. He says it would reach everybody and blah, 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 and it would be free. Actually, that exists now.
I know it does.
It really does. And if the materials were available to people, and people could read Dianetics on the internet, and you know, download it and study it and go off and start applying it, the recreation of that 1950 grassroots wildfire movement is almost inevitable.
Right. And you know, factually, one of the fundamental things that people need to understand is they are absolutely, because they've been so ingrained to think that the monopoly is Big Brother and you can't escape it, and it has to be that way. You can literally apply, as a profession, you can literally apply everything ever written by L. Ron Hubbard, and they are powerless to do a single thing about it. Provided you don't do only two things. One is you don't sell the words.
Right.
There's no copyright violation. You can do anything else you want in the world and there's no copyright violation, provided you don't sell a recompilation or a compilation of the words. Number two is using the trademark words
terms
in a promotional setting. You can say to the world and announce to the world on a communication basis. You just can't, of what you're doing, you simply cannot use that mark in a promotional, you can't put a sign up that says that, or you can't put a promotional piece out that says that.
Right.
But otherwise, you are absolutely free to apply everything in Scientology outside of radical Scientology cathedrals.
Of course. And you know what the proof of that is, Marty? That there is huge amounts of money devoted to getting people to donate books to libraries. Now that started out with a very valid thing.
I remember you were on that when you were LRHP.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just get LRH books in the libraries.
Yeah.
You can actually go borrow the materials from a public library and go and apply them.
Sure.
You can go and apply them together, you can form a little group, you can do whatever you want. And the Church of Miscavology is actually promoting to do that. They are saying...
They're promoting it, but they won't do it.
Of course not. But they can't then turn around and say, oh, and now you're forbidden to actually do anything with any of that material.
Right.
As you say, as long as you don't try and sell the book or the printed words, or you don't hang a sign up that says, Scientology, I am Scientology, you are free to use this as it was written to be used and as is described in my philosophy.
Right, and we should talk a little bit more about this intellectual property stuff, copyrights, trademarks, because it is a big sham and a big production, propaganda production that people ought to know about.
Right.